So this is Robert Brunhage. Is that how you pronounce it?
It's a very like unique last name. It's
It
like only my like family, or only my family pretty much. And it's like the in Swedish we used to say Brunhage,
okay.
but then like everybody has said Brunhage everywhere, so I'm like, yeah, it's that now. So
Okay, Brunhage.
yeah,
We'll go with that. Um, so you have a little YouTube channel that's a little smaller than mine, so maybe this will give you some
yeah.
publicity.
Nice, good times.
I'm just kidding. He has a pretty big YouTube channel with over 21,000 subscribers now. It's based on Flutter, and he's been doing it for a while now, right? When
Yeah,
did you start your YouTube channel?
I think it's like 2 years, maybe a
Two
bit
years.
over, maybe.
That's a long time to be doing YouTube. I feel like
Yeah.
I've been doing it for like 1 year now, and it feels like forever. And I started. I don't even remember like what life was like before I started YouTube.
Oh, I remember all my old videos, and I don't
Yeah.
recommend anyone to watch them at all. I just want to remove them, but people still say that they help, so I'm like, okay, I
Have
will
you
keep
noticed
them.
that like your old videos still get a ton of views? Because that
Yeah,
happens on my channel.
yeah.
There's still like one of my first videos. I think my second video is probably my most viewed video almost every month. Like one of the top three most viewed videos every month. I'm like,
Yeah.
come on, like guys, I promise the stuff has gotten better since then.
I still get questions like on my first video, I had like the font size really, really small. So I would still get like questions or comments saying like, I can't see the code. What should I do? Like, I don't know, watch a newer video. I like fixed it 3 videos in or something like that.
That's the worst. But all right, I wanted to ask you about how did you get started in development? Because I'm pretty interested about like I feel like everybody has their unique stories. There's a lot of people I see on the internet that kind of started from like scratch. They just decided one day to learn coding. How did you get started?
So that's a pretty interesting one. So when I was in high school, uh, I'm not sure that translates to the correct high school, but anyway, high school, we had like a a programming course. I think it was Java, and I really really hated it. I didn't want to I didn't want to be in that course.
Yeah.
And then I got help from my brother doing that course. I passed it at least.
Hmm.
But then I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do any kind of programming related things. But I always like been interested in like hardware, so building computers, fixing things. That's one of the ways I got into like fixing up my own keyboards and making them more nice, I guess. Uh, that was like what I did mostly. So I started working. So after high school, I started like directly working with fixing MacBooks and
Hmm.
then like fixing Chromebooks, I think it was. And then after like half a year or a bit more than that, after like fixing, I don't know, 10 MacBooks a day or 15 MacBooks a day, I was like, this is getting pretty repetitive. uh, then I got into, because I always wanted to teach somehow. So then I got into like teaching, and then I started teaching in the high school that I was in. So teaching more hardware related things and or networking. And then I was like, yeah, I think teaching is fun, but the hardware thing still gets very repetitive.
Yeah.
Um, at least what I think at least. And then I want to do something on my spare time. So as my brother was already like programming a bit, and one of my friends went into like a like, oh, what is it called?
Say
Like
it in
a
Swedish.
half a year like study or
Hmm.
half work thing to Volvo, where he did some SharePoint related things. Um, and that's when we thought like maybe we should try do some kind of programming just to see how it is like 4 years after like high school or three
Yeah.
years. So maybe it was like 2 years. Anyway, um, then we started making a game in Unity, and we were really trash at it. So I couldn't program, my friend couldn't program, only my brother could program. So me and my friend just did like all of those visual things, trying to make the environment and fixing animations and stuff like that. But then my brother said like it gets, or it's too much programming for one person when you make, or you guys make all of the like everything else. The program is just in the initial stages of like any kind of thing, you have to do all of the programming, and that takes quite a bit of time. So that's when I like checked out how to program, and I think it was like the Brackeys series on Unity C#. I think he had like 15 videos. So I watched that one and I didn't understand anything. I watched it again, didn't understand anything. I think I watched it like 5 times until I understood the basics. But even then, I'm pretty sure I forgot like the most important parts. Like I didn't understand how lists worked at all. I didn't understand inheritance at all. But I understood like this, you can create a variable, you can create a class, and then you can have some methods. That was like the basic things I understood. So when we did, or when I tried to help with programming, I could do some basic things, but when we tried to do like things like an inventory, I didn't know how to make an inventory, because the inventory is just basically a bunch of lists, and I didn't know how to use lists. I didn't understand like the basic concept of an inventory is just taking an item, adding it to a list, removing it from a list, switching positions from a list or array or whatever you want to call it. And I was like, okay. And then my friend was done with that like course or study or work thing for half a year at Volvo, and they recommended him a 1.5 year course where they stud or where they teach C# and SharePoint. And this was back in, I think it was 2016 or 17, I think. And then I joined him as well. So we did that course for 1.5 year. And then directly after that, we got into our first job, and then I switched job. And then during that time, I also wanted to make some kind of like apps. And then I got into, Flutter that way, pretty much.
So you went from so you didn't have a degree or anything. You just went from just picking it up from YouTube and stuff like that, self-taught, right?
Yeah. So pretty much the basics, or all the basics, I pretty much taught myself. The games were really, really trash. I didn't really like. I wouldn't recommend anyone to play them. I don't even know if I have them left or I have them anyway. But yeah, I learned like the basics by myself, and then like that first C# course in that one, I don't know what is it called, not course, anyway.
Maybe like work study, I think.
Yeah, something like that. That first course of C#, that was like super simple, because I already know all of those basics. It was just like it reinforced some like concepts like inheritance and of course lists again. But other than that, then it was just like building on top of those pretty much. And
I mean, that's nuts. So I feel like, so in America, it's like pretty hard to get a computer like science or development job if you don't have a degree. Is it the same way over there, or was how did you manage to get that? Because I know you like
so
work for
it
some bigger
depends.
companies too, right?
So it depends. So you could probably get jobs without like any kind of education, but then you would have to show a bit for it. So you have to make a like probably good projects on the side, and then be able to show that. So what I did was that my it's not like the education is not the same as so we have 2 types of educations in Sweden, pretty much. The normal type of education where you have like those science degrees and stuff like that, and that was what my brother went through. I think that was like 3 years. And the one I went through was like a work-ish education. So the people that taught them was like people coming from
Okay.
companies, and they taught them, and the only courses or the education types they had was depending on what the market actually wanted. So for example, this education was SharePoint, and that's because the market really needed SharePoint developers pretty much. So we did like, I don't even remember any kind of SharePoint things, but a lot of the things we did was web related. So we did a bunch of React, CSS, and then backend and stuff like that. So the first job wasn't that much SharePoint. It was just a bunch of like web development, pretty much.
I feel like that sounds like a really good idea. Like
Yeah.
instead of going to school, because like my first year at like a job, I learned like more than I ever learned at school in terms of development. And that seems like to actually have it set up in a way where you learn with the job and people who actually do it. That seems like the way it should be. Like that should definitely be an option here. I feel like I've never heard of that.
Yeah. So a lot of the people that went into that like course education or whatever you call it, a lot of them came from the same like higher education that my brother went through, like science degree, not science degree. I don't even remember what it was called. Anyway, they come from that like normal education type, but they couldn't get a job. So they went through the same education as I did, because the main difference is that we had like the education only exists if there's a demand in it, and the ones teaching it are from different companies, so we get connections to companies quite like directly. And then as well as we also had like 2 sessions, or 2 times we had like 6 or 8 weeks of like learning in a company pretty much as part of the curriculum. So that was like the places I were or learning or working in the education. That place I got to work directly after the education pretty much.
So it's kind of, I mean, we have like internships here.
Yeah.
It seems like an internship, but actually like,
yeah, it's an internship, but it's inside the education, so it's part of it. So you have to do the the internship, and then they like grade you, or the company grade you, like, oh, you were a good candidate or a good person, or you did these things, or you worked with these things that the education wanted you to do and stuff like that.
I mean, it seems like a good idea. I feel like we should start doing that here in the States. We gotta go.
I really thought it was like not, it should, like, I can't even speak. It seems like it should be other like countries doing the same thing. Like, I don't know about it, but at least in Sweden it's like super common.
Here it's not a common at all. You have to go through 4 years. Then getting the internship during the summers is like impossible. Like people that know somebody, they can easily get an internship. But like for me, my family's here, like the first generation, like we're the only family. We don't know anybody. I had to apply to like, I think like 200 or 300 even internships. First year I got one in like the school had like this program, it's called like a guaranteed paid internship program.
Yeah.
If you had a high enough GPA, they got you into it. But like the internship was kind of shitty. It was like it was at the actual school, and it was interesting because like I learned a lot, but like I didn't do anything. I just learned, just did more school during the summer, which is cool, I guess, but didn't make any.
So like, I think the main difference with the education I went through was that I guess your education was very, or had like a lot of courses that was very like, what are they called? Higher education types of courses. So like learning more data structures and stuff like that. The education that I went through was not really that much about that. It was very much teaching the things that you're going to work with. So for example, we had the C# course, then we had the C#2 course, which was directly with ASP.NET, I think it was. And then we got into .NET Core, and then we got into React, and just working like with those different frameworks, learning the basics, but more like the way you pretty much work with them in work, I guess.
I feel like that's a really good way to learn too, because I mean, you probably hear people like, oh, the best way to learn is build projects if you're starting by
Yeah,
yourself. Well, this is like build projects while being guided by people who actually do
yeah,
this stuff.
yeah,
That's should be done more. Should be done
yeah.
everywhere around the world. But all right. I also wanted to go over how did you start with Flutter, because that's completely different from
Yeah.
I feel like what you're doing in your day job. Well, not completely different, but like it's
So
different.
yeah, so during that time I was in education, um, I wanted to do side projects. So I did still some kind of like small Unity projects and stuff like that because I just thought it was fun. Um, but then I don't remember what I wanted to do. It was some kind of app I wanted to do at least.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was like some typical like social media food app or whatever I want to do. Um, and I did it in Android, I
Mm-hmm.
think it was. Yeah, I did it in Android. And then when I got like 2 months in, I thought like, but if I'm going to make an app, I would want to release it on
Yeah.
iOS as well. And I thought like, um, that this is pretty much
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of work, and I wasn't even like close to finish
Yeah.
because that was like a super ambitious project. And I started to think like, is there any way to build for both, or should I learn one and build the other one? And that's when one of the people in the same education as me said that, oh, but there is Xamarin, so you can check out Xamarin to build like cross-platform for both of them. And I was like, okay, that sounds interesting. And I checked it out a little bit, but it was still like Xamarin was very, very different than like normal native development.
And
Uh,
Xamarin is Microsoft, right?
yeah, or I don't know if it was that then, but probably I don't really know. I took like a week or 2 weeks looking into
Yeah.
it. Uh, and I felt like it didn't feel intuitive as I wanted to. And then at that same time, I think, yeah, that specific week that I was looking into finding a way to build both of them, or if I should learn iOS as well, uh, Flutter released their like um, first trailer
Mm-hmm.
that like the welcome to beta of Flutter or something like that. Um, so it's like, okay, I will try that out. Maybe it's from Google, so it can't hurt to like try it out at least. Um, so I tried it out. Took like 1 or 2 days just going through the documentation, learning that basic app they wanted to do. I don't even remember what it was now. It
Probably
was
some
like a
to-do app.
list, and then you just heart list items or something like that.
Probably some to-do
Uh,
app like they always do it.
yeah, and I went through that, and I understood some of the things,
Mm-hmm.
and then I was like, okay. And there was like no content of it at all. It was just like those basic documentation, and they had like really great documentation. So I thought like, okay, I will see if I can recreate the app I had done in 2 months in Flutter. And I think it took like, from not knowing anything, it took like 1.5 weeks, and I had the same result. Yeah, sure, it was. I knew most of the things, the backend was set up and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
but I just felt it was very intuitive to get into. Coming from like, I didn't know much Android development back then either. So I remember when I first made that app in Android, and I was going to make a list view for all of the posts of food.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to like, I made a normal list view or something like that, and it didn't work good. And then they recommended that you should have a recycler view so it doesn't render all of the things at the same time. And then that recycler view had to have an adapter, and I didn't understand any of this when I actually did it. And that, I don't know how many lines that like list class became. It was like 2,000 lines of code just to display a list. It was very, very horrible. And then I made that same list in Flutter and was like list view.builder. And I was like, what am I doing? And then yeah, at that time I used to switch over to Flutter and just learn the basics.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I did that, I realized there was like, I think MTech Viral was the only one doing videos back then. And I don't think he had many videos, or he has quite a lot of videos anyway, but I felt like every time I searched something that was that I wanted to learn, it was like no videos of it, and the only thing I could find was like like when searching for Flutter on YouTube, when there was no Flutter videos, the only thing that appeared was like a pony coming from like My Little Pony or something, because that pony was called Flutter. And I was like, every time. So I remember back like 1 year ago, I made a tweet and I said like, is there anyone else remembering that time when you search for something on YouTube for Flutter and you only find ponies everywhere? So that was the time when I made videos, because I thought like, yeah, maybe other people shouldn't have to do the same thing I did.
Have to deal with the My Little Ponies.
Yeah, pretty much. So
Oh, man.
that's pretty much how I started to make videos.
So it's kind of funny that you mentioned like your first app was like a social media type of app. 'Cause
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
exactly what mine was too.
yeah. I think that's probably like the most the app that everyone tries to do in the beginning,
Mhm.
because they always get inspired by something like Instagram or Facebook or YouTube or whatever, and they just want to make like the biggest apps that they can do, but they don't realize how actually big they are.
Yeah.
Not just like showing you a list. Then you have to, for example, if you're doing like some kind of social media, then Firestore, for example, or I don't even know that Firestore was a thing back then, but real-time database, it's like super hard to handle like those many-to-many relationships for posts and followers and stuff like that. I think it's gotten a bit better now with like collection deep queries and stuff like that in Firestore. But back then it was just a hassle, and it felt so weird duplicating so much data everywhere, having cloud functions, duplicating who you're following, and then you unfollow to remove all of those. And yeah, it was not a good experience trying to do that with having no experience and then a real or a NoSQL database, pretty much.
I feel like everybody underestimates like how complex those apps are. I remember when I was making mine, one of the hardest things I found was to do the actual like feed, to show people you follow, to show their actual content. Like either there was an option you copy all the like everybody's stuff into your own collection, everybody's posting to your own, or you have to do some other crazy stuff. You get some appreciation for that stuff, but also I think that probably helped me, I think, a lot to learn about programming, building apps and stuff, because like trying to build that, you're like, there's so many problems you have to solve. Everything else is like a piece of cake.
Yeah, true. I still remember, because when I made that app, I think the first thing I wanted to do was not like a feed of posts when going over to Flutter. The first thing I wanted to do was like the profile page. And the way I had done my profile page was like, I had a banner color, and then like half or at the bottom of that banner color, I want to have like a circle for the like the profile picture, and then just had some like metadata such as like name, and then I think I pretty much copied the Instagram way of doing it, and then they had like the posts down there and the followers and stuff like that. But that was probably the time I realized that Flutter was like super easy to make UIs, because making just a circle and then putting a face in it was just an like a circular avatar widget, and I was like, oh, somebody thought of this before me. And then and then all of the other ones was just like column, row, text.
I came from, I did a little bit of Android development, like I said, my first internship that I had, but that stuff was a lot harder than, I think at the end of the summer I had the most basic thing like I ever made, but it was so much code and everything, and Flutter makes it so much easier. It's just, I feel like a lot of people that haven't tried it, and I feel like that's the biggest selling point of Flutter, is the actual like how simple and easy it is to do. But so you mentioned that you worked with you looked into Xamarin or whatever that cross-platform thing is. How about React Native? Because that was, so when I started in beta with Flutter as well, but not as early as you. I was like towards the end, like I think a month or two before it came stable. And then I was looking at React Native as well, and I decided to go with Flutter. But I wonder what your reasoning was.
So actually, I had done quite a lot of, or quite a lot. I did work with web development at that time. So I actually worked with React. So I had like a very good understanding of those things.
Mhm.
And it was just like a fluke pretty much. I didn't actually know about React Native when I found Flutter, so I didn't have to make that comparison between them. Should I choose React Native? Should I choose Flutter? I didn't really even know about React Native, so I was like, okay, go Flutter.
Mhm.
and then afterwards, I have checked it out some, and I think like my honest opinion on which way you should go or not, if you are like coming from a web development experience, I don't think it would hurt to do any of them. In the end, I think React Native is a good approach. I don't have anything like against it. It's just that I don't think either that going into Flutter is hard if you're a web developer. Like
Mhm.
Dart is a super simple language either way. So if you know like JavaScript or TypeScript or whatever, um, and of course I had like background in C# as well, but like Dart was never an issue for me. I picked it up quite quickly, and I still remember that first app I did, uh, and I got some help from Simon Lightfoot, and all of my methods didn't have a return type or the type, so I didn't write void, I didn't write like the
Mhm.
return type and stuff like that. So he like refactored everything. I was like, oh,
Mhm.
but like I think if you want to try out Flutter, it's it's like check a basic Dart course or Dart series on YouTube or whatever to just understand the basics. And that's pretty much it. You don't have to understand more than the basics to make quite complex apps anyway. Uh, and if you don't want to learn Flutter because you already know like TypeScript or JavaScript and you don't want to learn Dart, then just go React Native. And if you find out that yeah, some things doesn't work on React Native, yeah, then you can of course check out some other solutions.
Mhm.
But it's just like Flutter is just a tool as anything else. If it doesn't, or if you find something else that fits your needs, then you of course pick that. It's no need to like learn more things than necessary, pretty much,
That's
unless you want to, of course.
that's it's not a good so usually all the people that are into Flutter, they all
Yeah,
hate on React Native, but
yeah,
you have to be a little more kind about it.
yeah. But I like I have a friend that I don't think he got that work. He had like a consultant uh, thing he wants the company wanted him to do was which was React Native, and like I looked into it some, and I was like, nah, just go, just do it pretty much.
Mine was a little bit different. I started with so the way I did the social media app thing.
Yeah,
I first started with a website, so I tried to do the whole social media thing with HTML, CSS, like JavaScript, all that,
yeah,
which makes it even harder than trying to do it with like
yeah,
something. And then I ran into I kind of like finished it, and it was for the most part like okay, but then I started using it, started having other people use it, and then I ran into some issues with like multi-threading or something.
yeah,
All right, I got to take a pause. Like I don't know what the hell I'm doing anymore. I got to go learn about this stuff.
yeah,
And then I had an idea to make some app. That idea quickly like disappeared. I'm like, oh, let's. But it seems to be a little bit easier to make apps than websites,
yeah,
at least with like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So I'm like, all right, let's look into this. And I decided to let's try to make the social media now with an app.
yeah,
And have you heard of Ionic framework?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So I started with Ionic before Flutter, and it was decent. It wasn't anything special. It had more like web
yeah,
looking like workflow, and then and it went okay. And but then I saw like Flutter. I saw I think maybe the same video of them like announcing Flutter, but I saw it like 3 or 4 months after it
yeah,
actually started. I'm like, oh, should try this. And I saw React Native. I'm like, oh, React people actually use like React Native professionally at this point. But then I
yeah.
realized React was made by Facebook, and I'm like, that just made the decision for me. Like we're going with Flutter. And then yeah, that led to another. Um, so you started your YouTube channel because you wanted to show people about Flutter because there was nothing with Flutter, right?
Yeah. So
That's
pretty much just make it so people don't coming to like those hard like
Little ponies.
yeah, the little ponies. No,
Yeah.
but at least trying to not make people get stuck as much as I did in the beginning, because like now I think people underestimate how much content there is actually out there to actually solve the different problems that they want to solve. Back in the beginning, the only thing we like had to find different solutions was like the documentation.
Yeah.
So the documentation was everything, and that's still the only thing that I pretty much use.
Yeah.
Unless it's my old videos checking things that I forgot pretty much.
Yeah. I noticed that's one of the best things about having a YouTube channel. Like if I did the topic in the back
Yeah.
like before, I'm the best person to explain it to like myself.
Yeah.
So I can literally learn a whole topic in like 8 minutes if I forgot. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But you work full time while doing this YouTube channel.
Yeah.
How do you manage that? Because I know me personally, working full time and creating YouTube videos, it's a lot of work. Like people, I don't think realize how much work YouTube
Yeah.
takes. But how do you manage?
So during for example, during the education I was or did,
Mm-hmm.
every time I got home, I started working on the Unity project, and I did this for like 6 or 7 months, like every day, and I worked all of the weekends.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I did some other things as well. I played games and took like walks and stuff like that. But most of the time, so I was just like programming, like very much or quite a lot. So that pretty much got me used to working quite a bit. Then when I started the videos, I did it because I really like doing it. So it wasn't like it didn't strain that much, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But the strain came a bit afterwards. So I think I did 2 videos a week for like, I don't really know how long I did, but I did it for a while. And that's when I start to feel like that burnout. Because I was working full time. I wanted to like build something my own. So I built apps and I did websites and stuff like that. And then every time I got stuck on something, I want to make a video on it. So I then made a video of it. And that went just on and on for every week, 2 times a week. So that at that time, after a while after that, I got pretty burned out. So I stopped making videos. And then I don't really know how long I stopped making videos. I think it was like half a year or something like that. It was quite a big break. But after that, like it didn't feel like the only thing I did was when I stopped making the videos, I just replaced it with something else.
Yeah.
So I started like building my apps more pretty much. So I still like worked as much as I did before, and that just kept going on all the time. But I noticed like the one thing that made it fun to make videos was like finding a topic that I thought was fun, and then trying to make it in a way that pretty much you think is fun and not being like a hassle. Because the reason I could make apps or like learn programming in my spare time that much after work as well was because I enjoyed doing those things. So I enjoyed making games on my spare time. I enjoy making like apps on my spare time. And as long as you pretty much make YouTube the same thing, I believe it's a bit easier to do. And this I realized probably like 3 months ago. So after making videos for like, or being in the YouTube space for like 1.5 years or more, that's pretty much the time I realized that I shouldn't make videos just to have a goal of showing as much as possible, but more of showing things that I enjoy more or showing things that I think is more fun to do. And of course, I have to like think that, okay, is someone going to watch this video more than this video? Then yeah, I probably should focus more on the video that the person will enjoy more. But I try to make it still as a way that I think is fun. Because if I don't think it's fun, I'm just going to get burned out, and then I will create no videos. So it's like that's the main thing that drives me is pretty much making it fun, I think. And then of course having those small goals of like earning X amount of money a month for releasing X amount of videos a month for getting X amount of views or whatever.
Yeah.
Those little small goals help, but you still get burned out watching them like every month.
I think that's. I mean, I think that's how how it's important to keep it like that, keep it fun. Because I
Yeah.
realized I was doing 2 videos a week before previously too, and I was kind of
Yeah.
forcing them out. I had like this whole series called like the book club app series, and I
Yeah.
was trying to build an app while making videos for it, and then I realized like that's a ton of work, and then I was like forcing myself to do it, and I kind of stopped.
Yeah.
And then I started doing like I don't know if you noticed, but my recent videos are more about like theoretical parts of like how
Yeah.
Flutter renders widgets, and like that stuff actually
Yeah.
interests me more. So that's why I've
Yeah.
been doing that more.
But I think that's like the approach, the best approach. Like if you have something that you enjoy doing, then of course there will be times where, for example, it's a video or a week you don't want to make a video because you're tired or you want to take a break or something like that. And I still haven't myself found a good like way around this.
Mm-hmm.
Either I don't make a video that week, but then I think I should have made a video, and then I just pressure myself that okay, now YouTube will not recommend my videos as much, and then I just push myself to create that video. Uh, so I don't have any solution for that yet, but like all of the times at least when I make videos that I don't have that like experience, then I think it's fun, and that drives me to go through that boring time when I don't want to make a video pretty much.
I gotta get those a lot too, where you just
Yeah.
kind of have to force yourself. But and for me, at least, I notice even like when I'm forcing myself, I guess when it comes to like anything that I do, I have to sometimes force myself at the
Yeah.
beginning, and like then you start like, oh damn, this is actually a pretty cool video or something like that, or pretty cool app, and it gets better. It's not,
Yeah.
I think it's hard, but it's still fun overall, even
Yeah.
during the bad times. So do you have any? I always kind of feel a little bit like I'm a imposter when I'm
Yeah.
on my when I'm making videos on Flutter, because technically I don't have any apps on the App Store right now. I have like 3 apps that went to beta and then died
Yeah.
off in beta, and I never released them. Do you have any apps in the App Store?
Yeah, but so the way I made apps was that I never actually wanted. I didn't really care about marketing them that much, and that's probably the main thing you should probably do if you want
Yeah.
viewers is to like focus probably like more than 50% on just the marketing. Uh, but like the viewpoint I had when I made apps was just making apps for small things that I wanted to solve for myself.
Mhm.
So the first app that I actually released was like a reminder application for watering your plants.
Mhm.
Um, because we just moved to our first apartment that time, and we got some like plants from my parents and neighbor and stuff like that to have in the apartment, and we never like remembered to actually water them. And there was one other application, and it looked really bad, so I didn't I didn't like it, but just the reason that it looked bad. So I made an application that the sole purpose of it was to just look better than that one. I didn't care about some of the features, so I didn't implement them. I just wanted it to look a bit better.
Mhm.
So like I made it for myself, uh, and then I just published it, and I didn't market it at all, pretty
Mhm.
much. I probably put out one tweet or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, and then let's see. Then I made another app, which was just putting down how much you earn, like in terms of money, a month from side things. So, for example, in this case, it would be YouTube, and then I could like put down, okay, I earned $20 or something like that this month, and then could put a category on it, and then I would get, depending on how much I earned that month, I could get levels pretty much, and I
Mhm.
have a level from 1 to, I don't even remember now, 1 to 40, and then I
Mhm.
would get stars and levels for a way to boost me pretty much to try to push myself, yeah, and then having some small like graphs and stuff like that, and then but I never really made apps to make them to
Mhm.
make money of them or to make a lot of viewers
Download.
users.
Yeah.
I don't think that was ever a goal. I tried to do it some, but it wasn't really the part that I enjoyed.
Yeah.
So then I thought more of the making videos part. I don't see it as, or I try to not see it as having like imposter syndrome, because I still can make apps pretty much,
Yeah.
and I know like I know probably more than the basics at least.
Yeah.
So like, of course, I don't know how to market apps, but that's not the thing that I'm focused on. I don't focus on like, here is how you're going to get 10,000 users, whatever. Like I don't have that experience. I don't know, but I have the experience of making apps. So that's what I try to focus on more.
Yeah. I think my point with the imposter syndrome was, for me, I don't even have anything to, like, if someone search my name on the app store, like
Yeah.
try to find my apps, I don't even have anything to show for it. So they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, for
Yeah.
you,
But
you at least have some, you have some gardening
yeah,
apps that
but
I might have to
if
download."
they if they use those apps, they will notice how really bad they are. Because like the first app I released, like I think it was like 2 or 3 months after the beta or when I started. So that one is like super horrible, but it works at least.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And I still have I still have all of my projects as private repositories, but still think every time I look back on a project, I used to think the code is really bad. So I don't share them. Uh, I have one application in the works, but I haven't really got the time to work on it. And that one, my goal with that one is just, yeah, it's a app that we use personally here, just to make things easier for me. But the goal for it as well was to test out Flutter Web. And then one goal is to make it open source. But like, I have worked on that app for like 8 or 9 months because I haven't really gotten time. So so all the features, so for example, the first feature I did like 9 or 10 months ago. So that part is like, I don't really like it because it's poorly written compared to like the last part. So those things are like stopping me from actually open source it. But I don't think like if I don't think you should get like hindered by those things pretty
Yeah.
much. But yeah.
I think everybody goes through it. I go like, I
Yeah.
feel like if you look back even 2 months on any code that I write, I'm like, what the hell was I doing here?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
come on. And like, even looking back to when I remember that social network app that I was
Yeah.
telling you about. It's like, looking back on that is just a mess. Like, that's
Yeah.
before I even knew what state management was. So I was passing like stuff around everywhere. I didn't even use
Yeah.
inherited widget. It was the worst. Like,
So
that is disgusting.
like all I remember in the beginning, I think it was the only like known things you could use was, I don't think provider was a thing back then. So we had is the normal like inherited widget, which I didn't really understand at that point. We had, I think scoped model was like, I think it was named scope model at least, was like very recently announced or added. And then there was like this typical like block. So I understood like the basics of inherited widget, but I didn't know how to actually use it for like with the change notifiers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And scoped model I tried a bit later. Or actually that was probably the first thing I tested out, just to understand like how to update widgets that is not like, update a child widget somewhere with some common place pretty much. That was the time when I understand the concept. And then I moved into having like one in basic or generic inherited widget and just providing my different blocks. And a block is just pretty much a class with a stream.
Yeah.
It's nothing special at all. And because that was my first approach, or one of the approaches that I liked the most in the beginning, when provider was released and all of those other state management solutions was released, I didn't care about them at all because I used to use the basic block architecture. And then I think the block library was created like a while after that as well. And I thought like, and I looked into it, and it just looked like a block version of Redux. And as I'd done Redux, I didn't really enjoy Redux, so I was like, meh. And after like, I think it was like 1 year ago, I tried out just basic provider and change notifiers, I think it was. And that was probably the time I stopped using block altogether, because block is not a, after using it, or like now I'm not talking about the block library.
Yeah.
I haven't really used the library. It's probably a great approach, but like the normal block architecture where you just create your streams and behavior subjects and stuff like that, it came with such a big boilerplate and so many side effects that you didn't really think of.
Yeah.
And it was just a really hassle when the app got bigger, to me at least, when I didn't or yeah, I don't really like it after using like provider, change notifier, and now of course Riverpod and state notifiers. After going through all of them, it's like,
yeah,
you can get that job done with all of them. It's just a matter of which one you enjoy doing it with.
Yeah, from what it seems to me, it seems like block has a big like overhead, something like a big learning curve.
Yeah.
But it could it's definitely a great solution if you have gotten over that learning curve.
Yeah.
So
it was very good for learning purposes for when actually getting into using Firestore more and just listening to the data, because that provides stream. So I already had quite a lot of knowledge of like flat map, and all of those things to manipulate the stream to make it the data I wanted to. But then it became a problem when I had two different blocks and I wanted them to interact with each other. Then you had to listen to a stream, and then depending on that stream, you put it out data in the other stream. And those things was just like super big hassle, and it was just not fun.
So, quick question. If you had to pick one state management solution to use for the rest of your Flutter career, what would you pick right now?
Like if everything was like production ready, I would probably go with Riverpod and state notifiers, or value notifiers depending on state notifies direction in the future or whatever. But if those didn't exist, I would probably just go with provider probably.
That was your answer.
Yeah, I usually go like state notifies, then change notifies, value notifies, all of those things. Those are like so basic. It's very simple to work with, and like Riverpod and provider and inherit widgets is just a way to provide those like super simple classes. Like as soon as you understand the basic concepts of it, it's like, yeah, you can work with any of them.
One issue that I've had with that is deciding which one to use, because change notifier, value notifier, state notifier, they all work. So how do you figure out which one to use for which scenario? Like I know with state, there's immutability. With change notifier, no immutability, right?
Yeah.
But like, it doesn't really matter. They both work, right?
Yeah. So there's different approaches. Value notifiers are very simple when you just, or value and state notifiers can be pretty much used the same way. Change notify is probably the most basic one, or easiest to understand one, because you have a class, you have some kind of your normal variables in there, and every time you change those variables, you just call notify listeners. Like it's very simple, but there's also some like rules you have to think of. So for example, if you have a variable in a change notifier, you have to make sure that they are private and only make getters for them. So you can't change those actual variables from the widget tree, because if you change them and don't call notify listeners, then the widget tree won't be rebuilt in those places. So to me, change notifies had like those. It works great, but it forces you to think in a way that I think should be like standard. You shouldn't have to think of those, because you could miss them. For example, you can, if you use a list in a change notifier and you make a getter for a list, you can still add items to that list.
Yeah.
So in that case, you have to make a getter for I don't even remember what it's called, unmodifiable list, and then provide that list inside it or something like that. And it's just some like those small things that you don't think of. And then after, like, let's say you create a big app, and then you have just getters for a list. And then half a year later, you're like, oh, a list, and then you add items to it and it doesn't update, and then it's very hard to debug because items get added to the list, but it doesn't update. And yeah, so that's why I don't really use change notifiers. Value notifiers, though, I really like because you don't have to call you don't have to call notify listeners, because every time a value update or the value updates, everything that listens to that value will get updated. But then there's the case where in the widget tree you can actually still change the value because the value is not protected inside that class. So you could, when you have a class and you use provider, for example, to provide that value down, you can still change that value anywhere in the widget tree or whatever you want. And it's nothing wrong with that, but it's just that when the application grows, the more you do that, it's harder to find the places where you change the value incorrectly. So let's say you always want to add like a user class inside the value or something like that. Depending on where you use it, maybe you have done something wrong with the user class and that value will be updated. But if you only have like a method in the value notifier and always call that method, then you know that every place that the value changes is always this specific method. So there you can always debug it and you see that, okay, print out the user that gets into here. And you can maybe notice that, okay, when I click that button, the user doesn't have a H, it's null or something like that. But then again, the value is not protected, so you could still do the change. And that's when I found state notifier, and they have made the value in value notifier protected instead. So you can't in the widget tree do, so they don't call it value there, they call it state instead. But you can't say like my state notifier dot state is equal something, because then it will just give a compiler warning saying that state is protected, because you can only change state within the class.
Yeah.
So it has all of the like benefits of value notifiers and change notifiers, but it protects you from all of those like stupid, silly mistakes that you can do. And yeah, other than that, it's just a great like experience to always be forced to make the changes in those classes instead.
I mean, that seems like everybody recommends the go-to way is to just use state notifier, because it's just,
because there's always those times when you just want to like try something really quickly, or you see if something works, and then you say like, okay, I'm just going to change this value here in this method in the widget. And you do that and it works. And then you do some other changes or fix some bug or whatever, and you forget that one. And then you think, oh, I will get back to that one. And then those things just pile up. But when you have like a more structured or forced way, you go with that because you don't have another choice. And it's not like super much boilerplate or something like that. It's just a different class. It's forcing you to have a method in that class instead. It's like,
makes sense. I mean, there's a reason everybody recommends it, and think I know a couple other people have recommended. That's what I've been using. I've been using state notifier with VerPod as well. It's been working well. I have no complaints. So must be the good way. But I realize we're like an hour in already, and I haven't even gotten to any of the questions I asked people to ask on Twitter. So I guess I feel like I could ask you enough for like hours and a whole day, but I think we got to answer some of the other questions. There's two specifically that I was curious about as well. So what is your YouTube workflow, and how do you create videos, I guess?
So the way I make videos is pretty much the same way that Fireship does it. So if those that do not know, Fireship is like a very big YouTuber for making development videos. And he made another channel under his name, which goes through like the workflow that he uses for making videos. And I took that workflow, tried to make it as much as my own as possible to see how it pretty much worked. So I tried this out for like 3 months ago before I started making the videos. Again, after taking like a small break. So now my workflow is pretty much find out a topic that I want to cover. If it's an application or if it's just like a small thing, depending on what it is, I create the application and I try to use it for at least 2 days. Because there's always like small things that you don't notice. For example, some of the latest videos I've done is like the movie app and stuff like that, where you have like, if you don't have internet connection, it will show a no network or whatever. And there's like always small things that you don't notice when you actually code it for a video. So I try to just test it and use it for 2 days, pretty much, just to see so I don't forget or have like major bugs in it.
Yeah.
And then when that is done, I just clean up the code a bit. And then I have that project on another screen. I open a new project and I used to record the whole workflow. So I used to record the whole screen for when I have the new project. Just go through the things. So like removing all of the comments, adding the different packages, and then just trying to code it up in a structured way as I think it makes sense pretty much.
Yeah.
And if I make mistakes, I can just cut those out pretty much, or just if I mistype something, I just cut that piece out later on. But what I pretty much do is just record the screen for the whole app creation or the video creation. And then I just have that content, and I have it just one big video or maybe like 3 videos or something like that, depends. Then I use Premiere Pro for doing the videos. And the first thing I do is not actually adding any of that content. That is just the bare bone or body that I want to have. So I try to aim to have a like 1 minute intro where I try to make the video as interesting as possible. Because I've noticed that as soon as the coding part starts, a lot of the people drop off. So I want to make it such a way that it's more fun to watch. It's just not like the normal learn how to do this thing, because those videos are great, but it's not really fun to watch them sometimes. Yeah. It's more fun to watch a video where you learn stuff, but still think like, oh, this was like fun to watch pretty much. So I try to make that intro as fun as possible or good as possible, where I just give an overview and trying to make a introduction of what the actual content is. So not like, today we are going to create this app, but more about like, for example, a movie app. A movie app can do these kind of things. So like showing videos, error connections, network, whatever, like.
Attacked.
Yeah, so making it more fun pretty much. So I try to just take GIFs and like icons and stuff like that to make it as entertaining as possible. Then the body, I go into cutting up all of those pieces of the video I have and just cut out all of the bad parts, make it as short as possible, but still like understandable. And then I voice over all of that. So I try to voice over like, it probably becomes like 1 or 2 sentences at most. And then I record next 1 or 2 sentences. And that part can take like, I don't know. If I have all of the content done, then the voiceover is pretty quick. It takes like 40 minutes to an hour or something like that. And then the intro and body is done, and then it's just an outro, and the outro is like, I have all of those After Effects for like Patreon and stuff like that done. So I just add them in and then voice over that part as well. So that's pretty much the workflow I use.
So you kind of record the video twice almost, because once you do it
pretty much, yeah,
for the actual screen, and then the other.
Yeah. So how I did videos before was just coding and explaining at the same time. But what I like, first I did a tons of mistakes. I had to edit quite a lot. And also there was many times, especially in the beginning, where I recorded and then stopped recording, stopped recording, because like I did so many mistakes and it was just annoying. And when I did voiceover instead, you can just, I don't have to cut out 10 minutes of videos because of a mistake. I can just cut out that 2 seconds of mistakes instead. but it became more video editing related instead of just coding and having a recorder on at the same time. It became more about recording the content and then making something out of that instead. And that made it just more fun for me, I guess, pretty much.
I mean, I can definitely see it. It seems the way you explained it got me a little mesmerized. I'm like, maybe I should try it because, like, I feel like, yeah, you miss out the whole, like, a lot of my videos. Most of the video, it usually take the shot is like an hour long. I do it like in one shot, but I'm repeating myself like time and time again, and gotta cut those out. And like it's a mess. And like I feel like with you, the way you approach it, it becomes more of a creative outlet, kind of, because you're trying to like just think like you're trying to be more creative and putting it together in a nice way instead of cutting out the nonsense that you said.
Yeah, because like a lot of the times when I recorded normally, just recording and doing the code at the same time, I think like the first time it was very bad, so I just removed that piece, recorded it, and did everything again, another one. It became a bit better. I did one, became a bit better, and then like the fourth or fifth time, then I was happy, and then I could have started editing and removing other those small mistakes.
Yeah.
I always wanted to try to make like a whole session where I had as little mistakes as possible, so I could have the editing part as little as possible. But then the first part did take a lot of time instead. Like I just changing where I put the time pretty much.
Exactly. I don't even think it's possible to do like a whole tutorial.
Yeah, it's always small mistakes. So then when you say like random words that doesn't even make sense in the context.
It's a mess. And I feel like, so the thing that I liked about the way you do it is because, so the way you explain where you're learning, we're trying to type out the code and do all that, you only have like so much like brain power towards doing both of the things, like talking and actually trying to express what you're doing there and coding at the same time. I feel like that kind of gets in the way with, and I think that that's a part of why I say so many stupid things or like mess up a lot during a tutorial, because you're trying to think about like a bunch of things. The way you do it is you don't have that problem, it seems.
Yeah, so one of the like most common problem I had was when I had like a bigger project I want to make a video on, when I coded it and talked at the same time, I always had to like think of what next thing to do. Sure, I had like another screen for the project, but I still had to navigate to those different places to see like, okay, now I'm going to create this new class, and I would create that class. Then I had to look over to the left side, check that class, and then go back here again, and then try to code out, and then realize like, oh, I don't have access to that variable yet because it's missing in another class because I haven't added that yet. But when I do it without like voiceover, that way it doesn't really matter if I miss something because those parts I just edit out, and I may just make the code fit in, and I can just mix and match it. It doesn't make the voice like, because if you have like, let's say you record 3 different classes and you notice that one thing misses in the last class, what the way I can do it now is I can just move that coding part over to the middle instead, and then that makes sense instead. But if I would have done a normal like coding session and just recorded, I can't move that part because that would make then the voice, or when I speak, that doesn't even make sense because I just cut out and put something in a weird spot.
I know you're not trying to sell me on it, but you're kind of selling it. I don't think it's still like a good amount of, I think my biggest problem is like there's still a lot of work in terms of like creativity and getting all the pieces together and making it all work. And I think that style, I really enjoy watching it, but I just don't know if I would do it.
It's a lot more work to do it that way. Making a normal video, I could do it within a day very easily. But now it takes probably a couple of days from coming up with a topic to then coding it, to then voiceovering it, to then finding all of the different icons and all of those things. So it's quite a lot of work. That's why I like one video a week is right at the point of maximum that I actually can complete without going pretty much insane. So, and then still because when I started making the videos again 3 months ago, I was done with the videos on Saturday, I think, Saturday evening. And from going from Saturday evening, it's been pushed a bit every week. So now I'm done with the video at like Monday evening instead. So it's like pushing now. Of course, I have like 2 weeks ahead for all of the videos, but it's still pushing a bit more than 1 week every time. So it's like the actual time is not 1 week; it's like 1 week and 1 hour. So so soon, or at some point, I'm going to be at like that point where I have to complete it faster than 1 week, but not at that point yet, so I don't have to worry yet.
Yeah, that seems tough. But all right, we got one last question that I think is is going to be a harder one.
Yeah.
So I hope you're ready. so, so what is the worst part about Flutter, or your biggest pain point, or what you wish was better?
The biggest pain point is probably the way Google has handled packages, and not packages in general, but more about the Google supported packages. So a lot of them hasn't had like, so for example, if you look at like Provider or like Riverpod, all of those have like very good documentation, very good feedback, and everything just works, and there's like issues that getting handled, like taken care of. But other packages that are like more made by Google, I can't come up with a specific one, but let's say just in-app purchases, for example, it's just not intuitive, and the documentation is really bad at those. And I think like those things could be improved quite a lot with. So for example, if you compare, I haven't really checked the Google payment documentation in a while now, but at least for like 4 months or a half a year ago, comparing that documentation in the README and the example code to things in the documentation of the actual Flutter documentation, it's like a night and day difference. It just feels like the packages was a second thought or afterthought.
Yeah.
And a lot of those could be improved quite a lot, and just getting more first-hand support pretty much from Google in like themselves.
Yeah, I think I
That's
noticed
like the most things. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good point. I noticed the same thing with like the camera plugin, like the main little camera plugin. Like it doesn't actually. I don't know. I haven't checked it in a couple months now either. Maybe it got a lot better. I'm not sure, but I know back in the day it didn't do a lot of like the basic things you want like for a camera to do.
Yeah.
So,
but I think like now they released like a couple of months ago the Flutter community, or the like there's a list of different packages that are getting like real support to getting fixed up, because a lot of those, I don't know if it's the camera app specifically, but just say camera app just for an example. So maybe that one didn't have all of the features or didn't have good documentation or whatever, but now it seems like they have a goal of creating those packages and making them good. So hopefully that's one. That one will solve it. But other than that, I haven't really found any issues working in Flutter. And then I have worked in Flutter like 2 years.
Yeah.
So like that's the biggest pain point. But then of course I can just make it myself as well. It's just an implementation for Android and iOS. So like it's just a small pain point in that case.
Yeah, I know. I know you mentioned data classes before. I thought that was going to be your biggest answer, or
No.
for the worst part. Is it not that big of a pain point? I guess because there is freeze. Like you still, there's ways to do it around it, right?
Yeah. So like it would be nice to have all of those like Dart features, but like the way that Flutter is made, it's just, I think the features would be nice, but as Dart is very simple to use, it's like either you get, for example, Kotlin is a lot harder to get into compared to Dart, and they have a more structured way of working, but Dart is super easy to get into, and that's like it feels like either you have a very complicated language that has a lot of features, or you have a more basic or simple language, and then build on top of that and make new features. So it feels like they are probably in the works. For example, non-nullability is one huge one that I really missed from working in Kotlin for native. And that one is like probably early next year going out full with Dart and Flutter. So that's one huge one. And after that, I think probably a lot of it will just build upon that. So like data classes will probably be not like far away anyway. So
Let's
I
hope so.
don't
That'd be
feel
awesome.
yeah, and there is like packages for code generation to fix those things. So it's
Yeah.
just a matter of I don't really like code generation,
Yeah.
but it still works. So
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for joining me, being the first guest on this great
that's a long one.
podcast. Yeah. I didn't expect it to go this long. I had like a whole bunch of other questions I was gonna ask, but I didn't want to hold you up for the whole day. I know it's
Nice.
a little later in Sweden over there.
Yeah.
But make sure you subscribe to Robert's YouTube channel. This is going to be in the description. Do you have anything else you want to promote?
Maybe the Twitter.
He's on
But
Twitter too.
mostly,
Make sure they'll be in the description.
yeah, but mostly YouTube. That's like with YouTube, you will find me everywhere
Yeah.
else. It's like whatever you feel like.
All right. Well, thank you for joining, and
Yeah, of course. Have a nice one.
bye.